we're now in the 3 weeks. We're out of the 9 days. And as you all know, we study assiduously the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. For as Hashem told the prophet Yecheskel after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, that the Yidden, that's when Hashem gave him the vision of the third Beis Hamikdash. And he says, Lord, why am I even getting this? The Beis Hamikdash was just destroyed. He says, share this with the Yidden, teach it to them, because by learning about it, you hasten its building. And in fact, the second Beis Hamikdash was built as a combination, a hybrid of the first and the vision of the third final Beis Hamikdash. Now, friends, we're going to zero in a halacha in the Rambam. So I'm not going to go through this whole floor plan that you see, but I just want you to see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to hold it up. This floor plan here, this whole thing is this. And that building right here, or this right over here. So just to know, look at what I'm pointing out here. So there's the basic sections of the Beis Hamikdash as you travel from east to west, and you're going up the incline of the mountain. The first section is the women's courtyard. Look where I'm pointing, it's the biggest section. The next is a small section. This is the Ezras Yisrael. Huh? It's the biggest area.
So you have to go through the women's courtyard then?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, actually, no, there were entrances. No, not necessarily. If you were bringing your korban, you came from here. Depends which korban. There were side entrances on the south and north. But generally, entering the Beis Hamikdash, you did go to the women's courtyard. And then here, I'm pointing here, this is a small area. This is the Israelite courtyard, Ezras Yisrael. And then here, I'm pointing, the entire area surrounding the Eichel is the Ezras Kohenim. This is the courtyard of the Kohenim, and they did all of the work over here. This is the Mizbeach, and here the Shchita, and the hides were removed, and so on, and the meat offered on the altar. The Heichel here, this was 100 cubits high, massive building sitting atop of the apex of the mountain. The Heichal that had an entrance chamber, a holy, and behind it the Holy of Holies that the high priest entered on Yom Kippur. Now we are concerned this morning with the chamber here. I'm pointing, it says Chamber of Parhedrin. Now what is that? We'll soon see. Now, I want you to look at the second paper, all the texts. Let's begin our journey. We're going to address our subject first on a halachic level, and then, as we always do, in the light of Chassidus. I would ask you not to read ahead, because you want to understand what you're reading, and this way you'll understand the flow chart of things. So the top of your page is Hilchos Beis HaBchira. This is the laws of God's chosen house as detailed by the Rambam in his classic work, the Yoda Chazaka, or the Mishnah Torah. This is Perek Alav Halacha Tes. He says, "Ve'ein boinin by eitz boilet klal." We must not build with any wood protruding at all. I'll just read it in the English. Only stone, bricks, or cement. Similarly, you must not make wooden chambers in the courtyard. Rather, they were made of stone or of brick. What's the reason for this? Not only because Jerusalem stone is beautiful. Why can't you use wood? The reason is, if you look at the handwritten note just below the get, safeguard, in quotations, see Deuteronomy, Dvarim 16:21, and Dvarim 17:10. What does the Torah say? The Torah prohibits, Hashem says, Leisita lacha kol asheira eitzel mizbechi. Forbidden to plant a tree near my altar, says God. The reason? The pagans would have big trees next to their places of worship. First purpose was it was a landmark. People should identify where it is. I see a big tree. And in many cases, the tree itself was worshipped. God says, no tree near my altar. Listen up, nothing's in it's on the text. Follow me. No tree near my altar. So the Chachamim came along, which is what their function is, to protect the law. And they said, we will not use wood at all in the entire structure. It's a safeguard to protect the initial primary prohibition of not having a tree planted near the Mizbeach, the altar. That's the foundation, that's the reason of the Rambam's ruling from the Gemara, from the Talmud, that you cannot use protruding, you can't use wood. Now, look at the note. The Ravid, a colleague of the Rambam, objects to this halacha, noting that there were wooden structures on the Temple Mount. Number one, the high priest's chamber was wood. We just looked at was actually initially called for centuries, almost 1,000 years. First Beis Hamikdash and most of the second. It was called Lishka Sa'etz, the wooden chamber, because it was made of wood. So what's the Rambam saying you can't use wood? The high priest at Kohen Gadol, what was this chamber used for? It was used for, first, he had a house in Jerusalem, and he'd go home at night, but he still had a suite available for him because he spent all day in the Beis Hamikdash, year round. But it was specifically critical for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur did not go home. Yom Kippur night, he stayed in the Beis Hamikdash. And for a whole week before, he was in this suite, preparing intensely for what he needs to do in Yom Kippur, because he did everything on that day, Yom Kippur, even the avodah, the service that was done year-round by an ordinary Kohen through a series of lotteries and other divisions. He did everything. It was exhausting and demanding, and he prepared for a whole week. Also, prepared for a week to avoid, as much as possible, contact with impurity. Because if there's a death, it's a 7-day purification process, and he would be disqualified. And that is not a good omen. So we try and seclude him from interaction with the outside world, and that was his suite, and it was made of wood. So the Ravid says, what's the Rambam saying? You can't use wood. He had a wooden chamber. Secondly, in addition, wooden balconies were built in the women's courtyard on Sukkot to allow the people to observe the Simchas Betzei Sheva celebration. This is the origin of the Mechitza. It started in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, when the sages saw that on Sukkot, when people were coming for the big simcha of the drawing and pouring of the water, 7 nights in Jerusalem was lit up, and whoever did not see this simcha never saw simcha in his life, but they saw that it was the borders were being blurred, and they said separation. And that's the whole idea of the Mechitza. They made balconies, the women on top, the men below, and that was made of wood. So the Rav said, what are you saying? You can't use wood. Here's 2 examples what they did. Lishka Sa'etz, the wooden chamber of the Kohen Gadol, and the balconies. Thus he concludes, so what did the sages enact? It's a fact. The sages enacted not to use any wood. He says, no, it means like this. He limits it. The prohibition against building with any protruding wood applies only within the area set off for the Kohanim within the temple courtyard, and not elsewhere in the Temple Mount. Only that region could be described as near the altar of God. So good, looking back at your diagram, the altar Mizbeach is here. This is the Ezra's Kohen. Here you can't use wood, but anything outside of that, you can use wood. That's what the sages enacted. It wasn't a blanket prohibition anywhere in the complex, only in the Ezra's Kohanim, the priestly courtyard, because that's near the Mizbeach. Hashem says, don't plant a tree near my altar. They said, we won't use any wood near your altar, but near the altar. So here's a logical, explanation, and that's why.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a couple hours, maybe around 9-10 o'clock.
What?
No, it's not for us.
No, it was okay. So that's why the Kohen Gadol's chamber outside the area of the courtyard was no problem wood, and the balconies, which is even further removed, for sure wood. But the Rambam, how do we defend the Rambam? He asks a good question. So the defense of the Rambam is like this: the women's balconies presents no problem because it's temporary. It was only for the 7 days of Sukkot. the prohibition, according to the Rambam, by the sages not to use wood anywhere is permanently. So it doesn't apply to the balcony. So that's a response to that question. As for the chamber of the Kohen Gadol, it was covered with lime or with cement. It was taka made of wood, but it was covered. So we've defended the Rambam. Now, a proof, that's okay. Is it okay to use wood and cover? Look at the next quote. Next quote is from the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Now, listen up before I tell you. The Gemara there talks about Darius. Now, there were actually two Dariuses, the first and the second. And the first one was actually the daughter of Esther. He was Jewish. Born to Achashverosh, they had a son. And he allowed for the construction of the second Beis Hamikdash. He gave Persia was the superpower. And in the story of Purim, we were still under Persian rule. They controlled Israel. And the whole story of Purim took place during the in-between period between the destruction of the first and second. And he allowed for it actually began, but then it was stopped. He allowed for its continued construction. He was actually a Yid. But the Gemara says he soured. He soured. At the end, where do we see it? Because he put wood, he used wood in the construction. Why is that a bad thing? If the Jews rebel, it'd be easy to burn it down because it has wood. That's what he did. So the Gemara comes back with, but so did King Solomon in the first temple. Now look at the quote. But did not Solomon do the same, as it is written, 3 rows of hewn stone and a row of cedar beams were used in the construction? So why be critical of Darius that he used wood? So did Shlomo Melech. The Gemara says no. It's a difference. Shlomo placed the wood above, he placed it below. First of all, the location. He added the foundation. So if that catches fire, the whole building collapses. Having it on the top is not going to do any damage. That's one. 2, Shlomo sunk it into the building, and he did not sink it into the building. Shlomo plastered it over. He did not plaster. So we see here that you can use wood as long as it's covered. So we've defended successfully the Ravid's refutation about the wooden chamber of the Kohen Gadol. If it's covered, it's okay. And the proof is that's what Shlomo Melech actually did in the first Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so now all is good in the world. You can all sleep at night. The question that the Ravid asked on the Rambam we've answered. The women's balcony is temporary, no problem, and the high priest's chamber is covered, no problem. But now the Rebbe asks, then why do that? Why make it out of wood and cover it? Just make it out of stone to begin with. Why do this? And that's a question all the commentaries ask. So the Tosfos Yontif, one of the commentaries on the Mishnah, gives the following answer. I want you to note, just like this, where it's located. It's located is here. I'm sorry. Yeah. This is where the suite is. Now here, all the way across, this is a huge distance. On the southern wall, there was a building here that had many functions, and on top was a mikveh. And this mikveh was used only by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara discusses the location. Why not? It uses this 5 times, back and forth. Why was it located so far away from his suite? It should be right there. Why make him walk across the entire width every time he needs to use it? So the Gemara answers it was done intentionally to humble him. It was a very coveted position, and you could take it, you could get carried away with it. And so it's not so comfortable. You have to walk from the hole, from the north side to the south side, mikveh back and forth. The Tosfos Yontif suggests, similarly, he's suggesting, this commentary, they made it also out of wood for the same reason. Not the beautiful Jerusalem stone, wood, same principle. This is especially used for Yom Kippur, the 7 days before, and that's where he was for the 24 hours. It was a lesser grade, humble. So the Rebbe doesn't want to accept this answer. He said, how much do we have to do to humiliate him? Not even, but to bring him. In other words, if you don't get the message the first time, a second thing's not going to help you. The location is already far enough. It's here, and he has to walk here. Sure, we've already accomplished. It's a very, very obvious and very tangible message. On top of this, you have to make it out of wood.
And 5 times.
Then it's back and forth. So it's a very strong message. We don't have to add to it. So now we're going to go deeper. So why make it out of wood and then cover it and it's okay because it's covered? Make it out of stone. So if you look at the bottom of the page, the bottom of the page is from Yeshayahu, and it's a prophecy when Mashiach will come. And Hashem says, they shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. In other words, no more exile. For as the days of a tree shall the days of my people be. Ki mei ha'etz yemei ami. And my chosen ones shall long enjoy the work of their hands. It's describing Yemaisa Mashiach. What do we see from here? That the tree, wood, represents longevity. And we've pointed out in the past that the oldest living entity in the world that's alive is a tree. And the oldest trees in the world are in California, the redwood forest. And we know how old they are because every tree every year it adds a ring. How old are they? Approximately 6,000 years old. This is very, very interesting that this is empirical evidence of the age of the world. Every year we observe it adds a ring. The age of the world, according to modern science, which is constantly changing, it's getting shrinking. It's much younger than originally 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they believed. It's all a theory based on carbon dating, which is all makes assumptions that you cannot prove about the release of radioactivity in the air. It's a whole theory, but it's a theory. Believe it or don't believe it, cannot be proven. But the only empirical evidence, not theoretical, but empirical, is the ring on the tree, and that shows us that the world empirically we know is 6,000 years old. So it represents longevity. So why a wooden chamber at a tree? Because number one, the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur is to bring long life for the Jewish people. And not just long life, but the long life described by the Pasuk Yeshayahu. So that's why we want it to be out of wood. It's actually a virtuous thing. But now the question is, on a deeper level, so if it's virtuous, so why are we covering it? The legal answer is because the sages forbade exposed wood, the reason we explained. But make an exception. They made this enactment, except for the Kohen Gadol, because the it's long life and flourishing and growth, all the symbolism of a tree bears fruit, so much powerful symbolism, which we want on this day of Yom Kippur. Why cover it? Make it the exception. So now, we'll continue next week. We've got 2 minutes to go. Now, you see on the page that the name of the chamber is called Parhedrin. But that's not what it was called. Originally, it was called the wooden chamber, Lishkas Ha'etz. Throughout the entire duration of the first Beis HaMikdash, which is 500 years, and for most of the second. The name changed towards the end of the second Beis HaMikdash. Why was it changed? And what does Parhedrin mean? It's actually a Greek word, not even Jewish. It's a word that the Romans used. And what's the story? The story is Parhedrin refers to Caesar. In order to make sure no rebellion, he would constantly remove the people, especially in the army, in the high positions. If you notice, most coup comes from the army, the generals. No one should be too comfortable in their position. They would change. That's called Parhedrin. The king's high officer, that every year was another one. What's the connection here? Sadly, a Kohen Gadol who is not a tzaddik the way he should be, and he goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, either he died then and there or in the course of a year, depending on what level. Which is why, now, therefore, towards the end of the second Beis Hamikdash under Roman rule, it was all controlled by the Romans, it was terrible corruption, and the Kohanim, Gadolim bought the position. And the Romans were happy to take the highest bidder. They were Kohanim, but they bought it. Because they were not righteous or worthy, many of them died, either in the Holy of Holies or in the course of the year, and there was a turnover. So the sages in the Mishnah, in Tractate Yuma, deals with Yom Kippur, changed the name of the suite to Parhedrin suite as a almost sarcastic, sad reflection on who's occupying this suite. One year was one Kohen Gadol, and the next year another one. And the name was changed from the old name, the wooden chamber, because it was made of wood and covered. So the question we're leaving with now is, friends, it's a very sad commentary. Do we have to immortalize it? They could change the name of the Beis Hamikdash to have this ignoble, shameful fact, like factored into the Torah, into the Talmud? It doesn't seem a Jewish way to do this. And especially, not every Kohen Gadol was unrighteous. There were many towards the end of the second, there were decades in a row and remained righteous. Why should he suffer the shame? It's this. Where's he being? What's his suite called? Parheden. He's a good guy. So that, God willing, we'll revisit next week. Okay, friends.
So you're leaving us in the thing.
It's a cliffhanger.